Hi there. Thank you to everybody who came to last night's hangout. There was over 60 people there and a wide array of views, opinions on everything happening around Trump's ill-conceived trade war, the economy, strategy, politics, how to survive it all. We have such an amazing community. I'm so grateful to all of you who came out and hung out last night. I would really encourage those of you who don't join us every Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. that to consider it, to come on by. You don't even have to turn your camera on. Just hang out with us. It's really one of the best parts of being in our community, and I'm very glad to have you here today. I've got a great conversation with Axios's senior political reporter, Alex Isenstadt. Joins me for the first time. He's written a new book, which was heavily researched for several years, over 300 interviews. It's called Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. Alex Isenstadt joins me for the first time today at 52 minutes. We start at 52 minutes. Got a lot of headlines and a lot of clips for you today, almost an hour's worth. So if you want to just jump to the interview, it's 52 minutes in. Or you can stay for the headlines and the clips, the clip show that is coming up right now. And a reminder, I can't do any of this without your support. This is an ad-free daily podcast. I put hours into every episode every day. I've got the smartest people joining me to try to explain what the hell is happening to us every day. So if you like it and you're taking advantage of everything that we're learning here together, connecting together, please consider a paid subscription or even paying more than you already are. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. That is my ad for the show. Can't do the show without you. The show's brought to you by you. All right. Now, let's get to those headlines. Time for the latest on the trade war. Trade war. The most idiotic, ill-conceived idea considered by any president in the history of the modern era, if not ever, here in America, is underway. Against the wishes of the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, Donald Trump has started a very serious, very damaging trade war with China and the rest of the world. And of course, that's where we start today. Yesterday morning, President Trump issued a new ultimatum to China. He promised to impose an additional 50% fee on all imports of Chinese goods, bringing them to a total of 104% unless the Chinese agreed to rescind their retaliatory tariffs. Looks like the Chinese are not going to be blinking or backing down first. He said the U.S. would not negotiate until China backed down. So I don't know how that's going to play out. The New York Times says the move seemed designed to send a message that the president remained committed to his trade war, even if it meant higher prices for Americans. Yesterday, he was asked about a potential pause on tariffs, and he said, "We're not looking at that right now." U.S. stocks swung wildly. At one point, the S&P fell as much as 4.7%. Then it briefly rallied to 3.4% after a false report about a tariff reprieve. The market got fooled by an image on Twitter, is my understanding. Governments are racing to submit proposals to lower the tariffs imposed on their exports to the U.S., but Trump and his aides have offered conflicting signals. The president said he would pursue deals, but both he and his trade advisors said offers like one from the EU to drop its tariffs on American cars and industrial goods if the U.S. did the same were not good enough. So we have all kinds of reactions. I've got a whole bunch of clips for you and lots to think about and say regarding the trade war, and some people even starting to believe that he is crashing the economy on purpose. And on April 20th, he is going to enact the Insurrection Act. I've heard all kinds of, I'm entertaining conspiracy theories of all types for the first time, maybe to try to understand and explain what the hell is happening right now. And we can't be too surprised by anything that does happen. I think it's fair to say. But as always, I want evidence for claims and want to hear what people think and have to say about all of this. More headlines from yesterday. We continue to follow the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, as I said we would, and I'm glad that lots of people are covering this. Yesterday, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court temporarily blocked a judge's order directing the United States to return this Salvadoran migrant that it had inadvertently deported. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, acting on his own, issued a, quote, administrative stay, an interim measure meant to give the justices some breathing room while the full court considers the matter. He ordered the migrants' lawyers to file their brief on Tuesday, so we'll see what happens there. But Justice John Roberts giving a reprieve of sorts. On a related note, a Justice Department attorney who struggled in court Friday to explain the Trump administration's deportation of a Maryland man to El Salvador has been placed on administrative leave, according to a Department of Justice official. At the hearing, the government attorney, a guy named Erez Ravuni, expressed his frustration over not having the information the judge was seeking in the case of the deported man, Mar-a-Lago Garcia, and made it clear he wasn't getting much help from his superiors. So what the hell is happening at the DOJ? I've got some brave testimony from a woman who was just threatened that she better not say anything. Well, she did. That is coming up. You don't want to miss it. Let's see what other headlines do I have for you. The world's biggest investor thinks an economic slowdown is already here. That's right. The BlackRock CEO, Larry Fink, said yesterday, most CEOs I talked to would say we're probably in a recession already right now. He said this yesterday at an economic club of the New York luncheon, I guess, and other experts are saying that we're on our way, or we may already be there as we speak. So it's hard to tell, but it's looking like that direction, which is just crazy because the economy was on fire and this was so unnecessary, and it's enraging. And I want to just scream, and I know so many of you do as well. But we got to keep fighting, keep paying attention, can't look away. The latest in USAID firings. 3 USAID workers were laid off in Myanmar while helping the rescue and recovery from the country's massive earthquake, according to a former senior staffer. The Trump administration dismantling foreign aid affects its disaster response. Literally, aid workers laid off while helping rescue and recovery in this horrible earthquake. Just unconscionable actions by the Trump administration, or very conscionable and expected. The administration continues to attack the veterans community. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs said Thursday that it will end a mortgage rescue program designed to help veterans who have fallen behind on their mortgages to keep their homes. How about that? In the meantime, Trump is planning to hold a military parade in D.C., announced yesterday. It's going to be June 14th. On his birthday. That's right. He tried to do this in 2018, but he had to cancel it. He was mad. He had to cancel it after military leaders said it would cost $92 million. After Washington, D.C. officials complained that tanks and large vehicles would tear up the roadways. But this time, guess what? He's determined to go ahead with it. Washington City paper reported that tentative plan for the parade to go from the Pentagon in Arlington to the White House, which is 4 miles. We'll see if he follows through with it this time. I feel like our authoritarian tyrant is such an unoriginal hack. I mean, it's so expected that he would try to do something like this, a military parade, you know, like other third world tyrants have done over years. Now we've got ours. Well, we'll see if he actually follows through. Okay, what else do I have for you here? We've now lost our ability to protect against drug-resistant gonorrhea. How about that? Did you see that one coming? Among the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention employees fired on Tuesday were 77 scientists who, among other work, gathered samples of gonorrhea and other sexually transmitted diseases from labs nationwide, analyzed the genetic information for signs of drug resistance, and they readied samples for storage at a secure facility. No other researchers at the agency have the expertise or the software to continue this work. So good luck with gonorrhea, I guess, is the point there, and learning more about what government does every day when we fire people who do it. How about this one? Medicare and Medicaid have announced they will not cover the blockbuster drugs such as Ozempic to treat obesity. Trump administration announced yesterday the Biden administration in November proposed allowing the public insurance programs to expand coverage of the anti-obesity medications, but the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services now say, I don't think so. It's not appropriate at this time, which is terrible news. And here's more terrible news. Yesterday, the Trump administration announced it has removed environmental protections covering more than half of the land managed by the U.S. Forest Service as part of the president's aim to significantly bolster the U.S. logging industry. So if we cut down all the trees, then we won't have any more wildfires either. So I think that's a great idea. Ooh. There's reason to worry about Social Security. Retirees and disabled people are now facing chronic website outages and other access problems as they attempt to log into their online Social Security accounts, even as they are being directed to do more of their business with the agency online. So we're closing our Social Security offices. You can do your business online, except we're making doing your business online harder. Enraging. And there are just way too many stories like this. If you're not already pissed, angry, and scared, listen to this one. For years, a National Park Service webpage introduced the Underground Railroad with a large photograph of its most famous conductor, Harriet Tubman. The Underground Railroad, the resistance to enslavement through escape and flight through the end of the Civil War, refers to the efforts of enslaved African Americans to gain their freedom by escaping bondage, the page began. Well, Harriet Tubman's photograph is now gone. What? The National Park Service webpage has removed Harriet Tubman's photograph, and now Trump is targeting a slavery removal from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This is crazy, and black folks and a lot of good white folks are not going to stand for it. That's what Nicole Hannah-Jones said. Black people are not going to stand for this. She's, of course, the author of the 1619 Project, responding to reports that President Trump targeting the slavery section of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The museum's slavery facts and substantiating artifacts of 250 years of enslavement of Africans in America, curated by historians, are the bullseye for the Trump administration. Quote, I think that this is a sign of deep sickness to think that you could go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture and feel the need to erase how black people got here, emphasized Nicole Hannah-Jones, who added, to erase or minimize slavery and freedom, part of that story is to create a fantasy of how we got here. We literally would not be in the United States without slavery. So we'll continue to follow that story and talk with experts about it. And what else do I have for you? Oh, this. Los Angeles County agreed this month to pay $4 billion to settle lawsuits brought by nearly 7,000 people who said they were sexually abused as children in that county's juvenile detention and foster systems. Lawyers said it was by far the largest settlement of its kind in the U.S. The wave of claims was so immense that officials warned before the deal it could bankrupt the county, the most populous in the nation. So I thought that was a pretty crazy story to read yesterday. And finally, back to the trade war, a billionaire hedge fund manager, Bill Ackman, who went all in on Trump in 2024, made a series of posts on social media showing that he is rapidly getting disillusioned with the direction of the Trump administration. He said Trump's tariff policies were causing a, quote, self-induced economic nuclear winter. We are in the process of destroying confidence in our country as a trading partner, as a place to do business, and as a market to invest capital. And Eric Swalwell, congressman from California, responded to Bill Ackman, if you enabled him in becoming president, may I suggest you shut the fuck up? So I thought that was a pretty interesting exchange yesterday that I wanted to share with you. Those are the headlines that I've gathered for you in today's episode of Stand Up. I do this every day. Headlines that impact you the most. They're often hard to hear, but they are the aberrations. There are still infinite examples of love and kindness being made all day, every day by us humans, and those don't get reported. So I try to cling to that idea every day as I go through the news and read it and share it with you. Now let's get to the clip show. These are the audio clips from the last 24 hours that I've gathered for you. I thought this was pretty powerful. I mentioned it at the top. This is fired Justice Department attorney. Her name is Liz Oyer. She accused the leadership of the Department of Justice of ongoing corruption. She testified yesterday at a congressional hearing meant to showcase concerns that the Trump administration is assaulting the rule of law, abusing its power, and forcing out civil servants. Liz Oyer said she was fired last month after refusing to recommend that the gun rights of actor Mel Gibson, a supporter of President Trump, be restored. Here, let's start with that clip of her from her testimony yesterday.
But I am here because I will not be bullied into concealing the ongoing corruption and abuse of power at the Department of Justice. DOJ is entrusted with keeping us safe, upholding the rule of law, and protecting our civil rights. It is not a personal favor bank for the president. Its career employees are not the president's personal debt collectors. I see only Democratic members here today, but this is not a partisan issue. It should alarm all Americans that the leadership of the Department of Justice appears to value political loyalty above the fair and responsible administration of justice. It should offend all Americans that our leaders are treating public servants with a lack of basic decency and humanity. But I am here because I will not be bullied into concealing the ongoing corruption and abuse of power at the Department of Justice. DOJ is entrusted with keeping us safe, upholding the rule of law, and protecting our civil rights. It is not a personal favor bank for the president. Its career employees are not the president's personal debt collectors. I see only Democratic members here today, but this is not a partisan issue. It should alarm all Americans that the leadership of the Department of Justice appears to value political loyalty above the fair and responsible administration of justice. It should offend all Americans that our leaders are treating public servants with a lack of basic decency and humanity.
Yeah, very brave by that former Department of Justice lawyer, Liz Oyer. She was threatened in all kinds of ways not to speak, and yet she did that. And I think that's awesome. Really, really important, the way that she is standing up. Now, let's get to another very smart person, Sam Harris, who I've had issues with over the years, but who I've interviewed several times in the past at SiriusXM. Never here on the podcast, but he's got one of the biggest followings in the country. He's a neuroscientist, philosopher, New York Times bestselling author, the host of Making Sense and creator of Waking Up. Had this very important commentary that I wanted to share with you because I thought it was dead on. So here is Sam Harris.
I mean, the irony for me is that it seems like an economic catastrophe is the only thing that stands a chance of convincing his cult that they made a bad decision. And I think it's legitimate to worry whether it would even convince them in that case. I mean, a global depression might not convince the 30% of Americans who are truly in the cult. But, you know, among the people I know who voted for Trump, who really, you know, imagined that he, at a minimum, would steward the economy in ways that would be, if not advantageous for all of humanity, advantageous for them. You know, I can imagine them recognizing that we all made a bad decision, or they made a bad decision in supporting him. If there's a sufficient economic downturn, the painful irony for me is that that's not the reason to have recognized how insane it is to have promoted this guy to the highest position of responsibility of anyone in our society. I mean, what's insane is that just before he shuffled out to the Rose Garden to announce these lunatic tariffs, he was meeting with Laura Loomer about national security in the Oval Office. That's what's insane about the Trump administration, right? We have grifters and lunatics and conspiracy theorists advising the president on how to manage, you know, risk of nuclear annihilation with Russia and China and our other adversaries. I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, to say nothing of the fact that you've got RFK Jr. in there promoting anti-vaxxers and firing, you know, half the staff of the FDA and who knows who else he's going to fire. It's madness, right? That's the thing to be agitated about, and the fact that there could be an associated price tag with it is all too foreseeable. But in my mind, if you're going to come to your senses just because your 401k took a nosedive, you still haven't pulled your head out of your ass. This is disaster on 100 fronts, and in 2 months, Trump has accomplished the unthinkable. He's ruined the reputation of our country, perhaps for a generation. I mean, he's convinced our allies that they can't possibly trust us, right? Because they can't trust us, right? We elected a moral lunatic to the office, and he's rescinded all of our treaty obligations effectively, single-handedly, and he's acting like we lost a war with Russia, right? Like last I looked, we had won the Cold War. It seems like we've lost it now, or we switched sides at the 11th hour. And now he's doing the bidding of a dictator who seems to be in the at the time we're recording this, seems to be playing him for a fool in the negotiations vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine. But who knows how that's going to come out? But the fact that we have announced to the world that we no longer stand with freedom-loving democracies that aspire to live the way we do in the developed world. We no longer stand with open societies against naked aggressors. We stand with aggressors because, the guy covered in orange face paint may want a hotel deal in Moscow one of these days. It's mortifying, right? That's the thing to be agitated about. And yeah, so it's just going to be an extra level of annoyance to see an economic calamity convince people finally that maybe this was a bad decision.
Well, maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. I thought that was a really interesting piece of commentary, but I want more because I want to share more because I thought it was very interesting that Sam Harris had this to say about Joe Rogan, who he, like me, knows very well. And here it is.
Joe is a genuinely good guy who wants good things for people. But he is honestly in over his head on so many topics of great consequence, right? When he brings someone on to just shoot the shit about, how the Holocaust is not what you think it was, right? Maybe Churchill's the bad guy in World War II.
Is that Tucker?
Or he's got Dave Smith, being treated as an expert on Israel and Palestine and the history of that conflict and the moral emergency that came to the world's attention on October 7th, and what is appropriate to think in the aftermath of all of that, right? Dave Smith is the only reason why anyone knows what Dave Smith thinks about any of this is very likely because Joe had him on multiple times to talk about it, right? He's a pure misinformation artist and on top of many others. And when Joe talks to someone like Trump or Tucker Carlson or, any of these other guys who lie as freely as they breathe and doesn't push back against any of their lies. In fact, in Trump's case, really fairly energetically helped put his lies into the most plausible possible shape. It is irresponsible. I mean, it is directly harmful. Our society is as politically shattered as it is in part because of how Joe has interacted with information. Again, I don't think I think a lot of this is inadvertent, or maybe all of it's inadvertent. But it is also avoidable, right? He could actually take the responsibility that really is his to take at this point to get his facts straight and have someone other than Jamie there riding shotgun with him. He could have two brilliant journalists whose full-time job, he could pay each of them $1 million a year just to sit there and make sure he doesn't put his foot in his mouth in a colossally irresponsible way, right? I mean, it's like it would be very simple to do a better job.
It would be very simple to do a better job. It would be a more entertaining show as well. I love what Sam Harris had to say in both those clips. Glad I saw it, and I wanted to share that with you. Also thought this was pretty interesting. This is a guy who goes by Pearl Mania, got a big following on Instagram, but he explains very well why the idea that a lot of people on the right, including Turning Point's Charlie Kirk, are just saying, well, buy American. Just buy American, and then you won't have to worry about the tariffs. This guy explains it perfectly well using the idea of a simple tangerine grown in America, I think.
What was that? If you make a product in America, you don't actually have to pay the tariff. Oh, well, that was a big lie, and he knows it's a big lie, and I can prove it using an easy example, this 100% American-made Florida tangerine right here. See, Charlie is counting on you not thinking about the fact that, yeah, if something's 100% made in America, that exact item won't get a tariff on it, but the entire supply chain and how it's made and all the materials and all of the other parts of it are going to go up in price, right? Let's take a look at this Florida tangerine, right? It grows on a tree. You pick it off. Why would there be a tax on that? Why would there be a tariff on that? Well, what about the hoses for the irrigation to bring water to this tangerine? What about the tractor that's used as these are put into the back of a tractor and then driven off to the supply area so they can be packaged? What about the bags, the netting that these are put in, right? Is the netting made in America? You know, when you buy tangerines at the grocery store and they have that little plastic netting around it, 10%. It went up at least 10%, the price of just that netting alone. Where's the label made that goes on that netting, Charlie? And then let's go talk about the rest of the supply chain. The truck that took that you needed to go put this tangerine at the grocery store. Every single part of that truck, were they all made in America? Because now if anything goes wrong with that truck, that part's going to need to get replaced, which means maintenance costs are going to go up because that part goes up. So now they're going to go pass that on to the actual seller of the tangerine, who's going to pass it on to the buyer. Once we get to the grocery store itself, are all the light bulbs made in America, Charlie? All those fluorescent light bulbs hanging over everybody's head. What about the shelving units? What about the refrigeration units that are used in the produce section, Charlie? What about all of the other different parts of that building itself of the grocery store? Is there anything that might need to be replaced in the near future that isn't made in America? Because all of them went up at least 10% because we put a 10% tariff on the entire world at the minimum, and at the maximum, it is percentages that we can't even imagine because they were imagined by ChatGPT as they were handed off to college students that you spent the last 4 years distracting from going into their classes while you stood out in a tent and yelled, "No, it's the wokes and DEI that are causing all these problems, Charlie." And Charlie, I'm even talking about something very simple like a tangerine that's grown right here in Florida. I'm not even getting into anything more complicated like a T-shirt, Charlie, because I know for a fact that your T-shirt costs went up because Turning Point USA, the organization that you run that is funneling billionaire money to make sure that these kids keep voting to lower taxes somewhere along the line and destroy the world and maybe conquer Greenland or some shit. That organization that you run uses Gildan T-shirts, and Gildan T-shirts, the blanks that you then get screen printed, those are not made here in America. Where are your T-shirts made, Charlie? They're made in Latin America and Southeast Asia. So your T-shirt costs have gone up. Your costs are going up. You don't buy American. You don't use American labor. You just use American voters. And then you turn to them and tell them the money's on the dresser and it's never there.
Oh, that guy's good. That was quite a rant. I think he did that all in one take. I'm impressed. Color me impressed. Now, someone who doesn't impress me, someone I also know really well. Boy, I have worked with a lot of people, it would seem, because I worked with Jim Cramer a lot. Arguably, he's the reason I'm here, kind of accidentally, but I was the audience warm-up comedian for CNBC's Mad Money college tour, and the executive got hired to create the original channel that I started on CNN, rather on Sirius XM, guy named Craig Schwab. What's up, Craig? He was, noticed me, saw me on the Mad Money college tour, and that is why he gave me a shot at SiriusXM, because he's already familiar with my work, which I had done, performed miracles for Jim Cramer, warming up the audiences before his live tapings. Anyway, he tries to have it all ways and both ways on CNBC on his show, Mad Money. Here is Jim Cramer yesterday. Bye. Get ready for his dumb sound effects.
For a 2000-style bear market where tech was laid to waste for a very long time, or it might be the big kahuna. That's the one of October of 1987, where the market went down hard for 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then it went even harder on a day we call Black Monday, where the market fell 22%. The president doesn't try to reach out and reward these countries and companies that play by the rules in the 1987 scenario, the one where we went down 3 days and then down 22% on Monday, has the most cogency. We will not have to wait out too long, will we? We'll know by Monday. Fortunately, we had an excellent set of employment numbers today. At least it makes it less likely a crash will necessarily lead to a recession. But if President Trump stays intransigent and does nothing to ameliorate the damage that I saw these last 2 days, I'm not going to be constructive here. I will contain my anger, but only because I lived through 87, and in the end, I came out okay. I was in cash for the crash. I know what this feels like. Oh, and if Europe moves against our fabulous tech companies next week, then I will be furious. That I promise you, because it should not happen. None of this has to happen. Which brings me to the game plan for next week. First, if the president does nothing and the Europeans create reciprocal tariffs against our tech companies, we have a very good chance. I want to be very methodical and not unemotional. We're very chance it will crash. It could be like Black Monday of 87. I don't see why it shouldn't. But if President Trump realizes it would be best to help our companies, especially the ones that are hung on tariffs, then we could have a rebound. We will soon find out what's.
I think we could have a rebound. I love how he goes up in his register there. All right, I've got a lot more clips coming for you, so let's keep going through them. Here is Senator Foghorn Leghorn. It's John Kennedy who is starting to get concerned, senator from Louisiana on Fox.
Do you want President Trump to consider pausing these tariffs?
Well, what I would do, I've been preaching it on the Senate floor with respect to Canada for the last 2 weeks. I want to see foreign nations lower their tariffs and then us lower our tariffs. If I were Prime Minister Carney, I would think about offering President Trump 0 tariffs from Canada on the U.S. and ask him to reciprocate. When you think about tariffs, or no matter who does them, they're just interventions by government. They restrict the freedom of people and businesses. I believe the lower tariffs on both sides, the better. Now, I understand where the president's coming from, Casey, and I think you do too. America is rich. Our people like to buy stuff. Every foreign business in the world wants to sell into America. The president's just saying, if you're a foreign business and you want to sell to Americans and take our money, then move here and hire our people. And he's right. There has been abuse by other countries with respect to the U.S. God created the world, but everything else is made in China. We know about the abuses. Having said that, what the tariffs at the level that the president has imposed them, in my judgment, I'm not going to feign understanding. I have no idea what the impact is going to be on the American economy or the world economy. I listen to all these economists confidently predict that it's going to do this or going to do that, and they're very self-confident. Most of them act like they discovered gravity, but they don't know what's going to happen, and they have a record to prove it. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's been painful, but it may turn out well. It may not. If it doesn't turn out well, I think the president will recalibrate.
To that point, do you think it's Donald Trump's economy now?
Oh, I think it is. There's no question. I think once he decided to add the tariffs, clearly, I mean, he will be held responsible, as he should, whether it turns out good or it turns out badly.
Yeah. Okay. Well done. I don't know. What a weird dude. Also trying to have it all ways. But in the end, he's going to give the credit to or blame. Or blame, do you think, which he'll get more of to Trump? We'll see. All right, here is Eddie Glaude. We always love Eddie. He was on MSNBC yesterday, passionate and articulate and wonderful in the way that he speaks, in my opinion, as always. And so I wanted to share this clip. Pretty long, but it's worth it.
I don't know what it's going to take for the American people, for 78 million Americans, to deal with what motivated them to make the choice to elect this man again, to make the choice that will allow these people to undermine every fundamental assumption we have, that you can just be disappeared. And then they can argue that, a court is getting in the way of their ability to exercise, foreign policy in some ways, right? I don't know what it's going to take for 78 million Americans to deal with what motivated them to make this choice. And the choice that they've made, we have to just be honest, is to literally throw the republic into the trash bin. And this is just one example. The tariffs is another, right? They made the choice. Now, what was behind it? We have to grapple with it, because it's the snake, it's the beast coiled up in the heart, the bosom of the country, as Frederick Douglass said. And the fact that they are doubling down on this shows you what kind of human beings they actually are.
Say more.
We chose a felon who is more interested in loyalty, who's more interested in retribution, who's more interested in grift than in democracy. And we chose a felon because we didn't want to elect a black woman. So to read that, to actually explicate that, is to say we would rather destroy the republic than for that to have happened. And until we grapple with it, there's no amount of protesting I could do. There's no amount of resistance that could come into play to actually force 78 million people to grapple with what motivated them to put themselves in this position.
And I think you're getting at how we're going to have to go through the next 4 years, right? Because I haven't on this show covered the talk of a third term because I believe it's a shiny object. I believe the things driving Trump's approval rating down are the man-made destruction of the economy, abandoning due process. But you're right in that 78 million people voted for someone who wants to shred the Constitution. Why?
That's the key.
What's the answer?
There is a sense in which the underbelly of the country, what Melville was writing about, right? That there's this sense, this tragic dimension of the American project, where the extension of basic democratic principles, the idea that dignity and standing should be accorded to anyone, no matter their gender, no matter where they're from, no matter their color, that has been challenged because some people believe that by definition they ought to be superior to others, and that the country should be organized in such a way to ensure that fact. And we have been willing to do monstrous things in defense of it. Monstrous things. And people have been using it in some ways, Nicole, for their own self-interest. They might not be monsters in that sense, but they might be unabashedly greedy. They just want to make money with and exploit people's grievances and hatreds in the way. But we've been dealing with this from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Say it again, Eddie. So good. I love the guy. All right, well, here's a guy I don't love, but I still want to play a clip of him. He's such an idiot, but also such an evil genius. It's Barstool Sports' Dave Portnoy, who everybody loves to hate, and he was just yammering on, I don't know what, if it's his show, the Barstool Sports show, but this clip got a lot of attention because he is a longtime Trump supporter saying this.
I'll also say, like, I've seen a little bit of, this was last week, like Clay Travis, Will Kane. They're like, don't look at your 401k. Since when do people care about the stock market? That's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit. Let's be honest. And I prefer Trump, and he says it sometimes. He's been like, I don't want things to go down. I would rather people on the right who support Trump, no matter what he does, what he says. Like, when you say stuff like that, to me, it's like, well, Trump could fucking cut someone's head off. You're like, well, did he really? Like, let's call a spade. Everybody has the right to panic and party and be worried about the stock market, their 401k, their portfolio. Don't suddenly be like, oh, don't look at your portfolio. Don't worry about it. Bullshit. Everybody looks at their portfolio. Everyone looks at their stock market. Everybody looks at how much money's in the bank. So it's a big deal. And Trump should be like, I fucking get it. It's a big fucking deal. But I'm trying to save the country, which he is saying, like, just bear with me here. Like, I'm not going to let, and he is kind of saying it. But again, the golf course thing, like, no, it's a big deal. Like, this is a big fucking deal. We've had one of the biggest stock market crashes, maybe the biggest man-made, like, by decision or a policy decision, a specific one policy decision that I'm aware of, definitely since I've been following the stock market, nothing even like it. So it's a huge fucking deal.
All right. Well, we go from one type of intellect and style of communication, Eddie Glaude, to another, Dave Portnoy, to yet another. This is economist David Rosenberg yesterday on Bloomberg, trying to explain it to us.
So they just calculated them not based on the actual trade barriers imposed by trading partners.
Well, somebody out there cracked the code because when you're taking a look at what the White House did to get these numbers was they took the trade surplus that each country has with the United States and then divided it by their exports to the United States. And that's how they came up with these reciprocal tariff rates, which isn't even an estimate of what their tariff rate is, but is a justification for lopping on these massive tariff increases, across wide swaths of Asia and, of course, in Europe. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's just a justification. You've got a situation where countries, for example, like Germany and France, okay, what's their net effective average tariff rate? You know what it is? 2%.
Wow.
What did Trump just do and his team? They slapped on a 20% tariff rate on the EU. Japan has an average tariff rate, 2%. They just got slapped with 24%. So none of this makes a whole lot of sense. But I suppose that maybe, since last November, we've become immune or numb to all this insanity. But you can't justify these tariff rates that were just imposed based on what the actual number is from these other countries.
All right. Well, can the courts stop the tariffs? Probably not. Will they? Probably not. And can Congress? Yeah, but will they? Probably not. It's looking more popular in the Senate, where you have a lot of Republicans who want to do something to prevent the president from unilaterally being able to declare this emergency and then imposing these tariffs. But what will happen at the House, which is led by Christian nationalists, accountability partner to his son, the great Mike Johnson, who reporters chased down in a hallway yesterday. You can hear him. This is just a very short clip. He says that he thinks we need to give Trump space to do what he needs to do. Okay.
We have to give the president space. His strategy is playing out. It's been less than a week, so I think he's owed that.
All right. Well, so he's not going to do shit, at least not yet. Now, I do not like Bill Kristol at all. Once got up from a table where he sat down next to me and left the restaurant because I didn't want to eat near him because I couldn't be that close to Bill Kristol and his wife. But yet he is on the bulwark, and he had this to say yesterday about Trump's idea for his military parade on his birthday. So I thought I'd share it.
Totally. I mean, he tried to do this in 2018. He got stopped. The Defense Department didn't want to do it. The Army didn't want to do it. The D.C. government didn't want to do it. Republican members of Congress were like, what are we doing? We don't have military parades here all the time in the U.S. just because you're a president. I mean, there was not commemorating some victory or something in a war. And now the Army was going to do some normal celebrations of his 250th birthday on bases and in communities and at cemeteries and that kind of thing. And now Trump's turning it into this, wants to turn it, and we'll see what happens, into this giant military parade, 4 miles from Arlington up through to the White House, I suppose. It happens to be his birthday. Maybe Andrew Egger and I both wrote about this in Warning Shots. Andrew wrote a very good lead item on Trump's hubris, the Trump administration's hubris in a whole bunch of areas. Maybe this will be the culmination of the hubris. Maybe this is the breaking point. Maybe people look at this and think this is not America. And this is Trump just using troops, using people serving in the military as props for him. If it happens, it also happens to be the 85th anniversary of the Germans entering Paris. You know, those famous videos of what's that called? Footage, the reels of Germans marching into Paris. Very depressing day. It happens to be the 85th anniversary of that. Maybe that's somehow apt.
All right. I don't know if there's any producers over there at the Bulwark, but maybe they could tell old Bill Kristol, maybe a little energy on the otherwise salient point. Jesus. Sleeping through you're on TV, or at YouTube at least. Probably more people watching you there than on TV these days. Maybe pump it up a little, Billy. Huh? All right. Well, comedian J.L. Cavan can be seen performing in Toronto as Donald Trump tonight. So I wanted to plug JL by playing his latest embodiment of our disgraced president, who is going to bring back laser discs.
So I just finished up a very beautiful meeting with BBNetanyahu.com. A very powerful talk. He's got that bass, he's like, hello, Mr. President. He's got that nice bass. I mean, I have a deep voice, but his voice is like, hello, Mr. Very, sort of, he's like Darth Vader, which is, I think, what they call him in Gaza, by the way. He's a tough guy, and we talked about Gaza, and he said, me Gaza, su Gaza, and I said, wonderful. Maybe that'll be the name of the beautiful resort we build. But I'm here to talk about tariffs and bringing back our industries to America, because everybody's saying, oh, these stupid people who don't understand trade and economics and numbers and other things that are involved with math and money and sort of business, we call it business, is they say I can't bring it back. They say, oh, no, you can't bring back industry and manufacturing the way we had it. And I say, no, I can do it. You're just too stupid to know that. And I said, I can do it, and it's very simple. Because for so many years, I've been wondering what the hell happened to the Laserdisc industry. Remember Laserdiscs? We've jumped right to DVDs. They were these little things, and now we don't even have DVDs anymore. Blu-ray. Remember Blu-ray? Remember Sugar Ray? He performed it. Mar-a-Lago. He's a great guy, by the way. Big frosted tips guy. But they said the Laserdiscs went away. And I remember walking into, Sam Goody and Suncoast, and I said, what's that? I like the bigness of the Laserdisc. It sort of lets it makes it look like you have like a platinum record in your house. And it's like, no, that's just a copy of Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, but it looks like I went platinum. And all of a sudden they got rid of that. And I will bring back the Laserdisc industry like you've never seen before. We're going to have Laserdisc factories all over our great country. And you'll be walking into people's homes from now on, and you'll walk in and you'll say, there was nothing here before. There was nothing. We had streaming. They call it streaming. You can't brag to people when you're streaming. It's like, oh, look at Netflix, look at all that I have. It's like, well, everybody's got that. But when you walk into a beautiful home, or even if it's not a beautiful home, okay, I saw where J.D. Vance grew up. What a shithole, but he's a good guy. We like him. You walk in, and all of a sudden you see on the wall there's a portrait of Donald Trump, your president, and there's 5 movies. It looks like you went platinum 5 times, and it's just the Fast and the Furious collection on Laserdisc. So we're going to bring back Laserdiscs. The industry is going to be doing so well. You'll forget about Blu-rays, you'll forget about streaming, and we're going to do great things with that. And we're also planning on being... Remember candy stripers? Remember I used to call them candy strippers? Because if every woman's a stripper if you just rip at the clothes hard enough. Nobody ever says that. There's the strippers you see in the clothes, they take them off. But if you get a hold of their clothes and you rip the clothes off, it's like everybody's a stripper, So, but they were candy stripers. They sell cigarettes and candy, and they were very hot. We're going to bring back them too. We're going to bring back all these industries. We're going to bring back... we're going to do fax machines like you've never seen before. I think there's been fewer people using fax machines. We're going to bring that back. And tremendous growth opportunity. Okay, tremendous growth. And we've abandoned our industries, and we're gonna tariff people until they give us our Laserdiscs back. So I'm announcing 300% tariffs on the country of Blu-ray, and 500. 500, biggest tariff ever on the country of streaming platforms. We're getting away. They've robbed us of our Laserdiscs. We're bringing Laserdiscs back, and it's going to be a great day when everybody has big discs in their homes. I said big discs, and I thought of Mike Pence and how much he would have liked that when I said that. I bet Mike Johnson right now is texting his son. I had bad thoughts, son. I thought I heard the president say big something else, but Laserdiscs for everybody. Bye-bye.
Laserdisc for everybody. J.L. Govan, see him in Toronto tonight. So good. So very, very good. We love you, JL. And finally, I've got a little bit from Jimmy Kimmel's monologue last night. I thought this was great. I always loved Kimmel. He was back from a week off, and here we go.
I'd say this visit from the Dodgers was a nice distraction for Trump from the fact that he is busy destroying the world economy. It was another terrifying day on Wall Street. The Dow was down. The S&P was down. Cocaine was up. The S&P 500 has lost more than 10% of its total value since Thursday, costing Americans billions of dollars from their stock portfolios and retirement funds. But here's the thing about Donald Trump. He doesn't care about money. He knows that there are more important things in life, like love. He's definitely flipping out. his once loyal gaggle of gazillionaires is turning on him because they're losing so much money. So today he wrote, the United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. That's right. Be strong and stupid. Also, don't be a panicking. And then in parentheses, he explains that means a new party based on weak and stupid people. Hey, look, I'm not an expert when it comes to the economy, but I am an expert when it comes to nicknames. And panicking is not going to catch on. Okay? But hang in there, everyone. There's no cause for alarm. Be strong. The guy who went bankrupt 6 times is going to steer us through this disaster he created for no reason at all. So far, Panicking Skywalker has wiped out $11 trillion since Inauguration Day. Gone, just into thin air, but at least we won't have tampons in the boys' bathrooms. If you look.
All right, there you go. Jimmy Kimmel last night. And now it's time to get to my guest. Huh? How about it? Wow, that was a long opening clip. Hopefully you appreciated it. Had time to listen to it. It's good to be with you whenever I'm here with you, whenever you're listening to the podcast. But now it's time to get to my guest, who is joining me for the first time on the show ever. He reached out to me and said, I'd love to talk. And I said, sure, because he is one of the senior political reporters over at Axios, breaking stories all the time and writing stories every day at Axios.com. He is previously a national political reporter at Politico, where he covered Trump since 2015. So very few reporters have the experience that he does, torturing himself, covering our petty tyrant. He's been a guest on all the major networks, and he's got a new book out, which is fascinating, interesting, and important. It's called Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. His name is Alex Isenstadt. I was really happy to catch up with him, to talk to him for the first time. You can follow him at Axios Alex and let him know that you heard him here. That would mean a lot to me. Let's do it for the first time with Alex Isenstadt about his new book right now. Alex, welcome to Stand Up. Great to have you. I've been seeing you ever. I turn on that TV. There you are, talking about this book. So I'm psyched to have you talking about it with me here on Stand Up. Welcome, sir.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, man. You've been at this for a long time. You're not the senior political reporter at Axios, but you were at Politico. Before that, you've been covering Washington. For how long now have you been down there covering national politics?
It's end of 2007, so more gray hair now, a little older. Been doing this a while. So,
but in that time zone, it's about the time I got into covering people who cover it. And I was, so it's around the same time span in terms of presidential elections and Supreme Court decisions and everything in between that we've been talking about and covering. So I guess the first question is, given your perspective, how did you think we'd ever end up here? Did you think we'd all lead to Trump 1, much less Trump 2?
No, and it's like this crazy thing, right? It just the unpredictability of politics.
Yep.
It shows you that whatever you think is going to happen in politics these days is not necessarily going to happen in politics. And I've been covering Trump since he first started running in 2015, and no one thought that it was a serious thing when he first started running. And certainly no one saw what happened in my book, what it's focused on is 2024. No one thought he was, well, some people thought he might win, but no one thought that this race was going to unfold the way it did. And it unfolded in a lot of unexpected and interesting ways. And I tried to capture that in this book, to capture the drama of this race, to capture the human drama, to take readers behind the scenes, to make them feel like they're a fly on this wall and take them on the ride, basically.
And boy, do you did like 300 interviews, and you really went in depth on this, and you can't put the book down if you pay attention to politics. And I think it matters for a lot of different reasons, but let's get into it. But before we specifically get into, and we can talk about Elon Musk and his role here, I do want to talk about your latest piece at your day job over at Axios, which I think ties into this kind of neatly, which is what happened last night in Wisconsin in this judicial campaign and Elon Musk's role in it. Start there, and then we can lead into how you write about Elon in the book. But man, it does look like a referendum on Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. You've covered it at Axios already today.
Yeah, and so what happened is, and to catch your listeners up, is that Elon Musk ended up putting tens of millions of dollars into this Wisconsin Supreme Court race for the Republican. He goes and campaigns there in Wisconsin himself a couple days ago. He has this rally where he essentially casts the race in these apocalyptic terms and says basically it's going to the effect of this is going to determine the course of civilization, this Wisconsin Supreme Court race. So talk about really raising the stakes. And so Elon, Republicans lose this election, and it came out to really be, as you said, a referendum on Elon Musk, who has turned into sort of one of the biggest characters other than Trump of the second Trump administration. And so now the question is, does this race portend bad things for Republicans in the midterm election? We know that historically midterm elections don't turn out well for the party that holds the White House. But the question now is, Elon Musk, has he emerged as this political drag on Donald Trump? Do people just not like Musk? Do people not like what he's doing with Doge? Do people not like the idea that he could be throwing his money around in politics? Do people just not like him? And so that's where things stand right now.
I would submit people don't like billionaires buying elections. And I would argue further, the right for years, as you and I both know, has been casting George Soros as someone who's been buying elections. George Soros, the billionaire, he donates to a lot of liberal causes and nonprofits, and some of it's shadowy and so on. You don't know where his money's going, but you generally know it's going to liberal, progressive ideas and nonprofits, and they translate that as he's buying the election. This, I read yesterday, somebody put it, Elon Musk is like a caricature of the right's narrative about George Soros. He literally paid people millions of dollars like it was a lottery. That's my one observation. If you have anything to add to that. Otherwise, I feel like you got to say one of the unpredictabilities you mentioned was Elon Musk. Alex, we were looking for 2 years at Trump and his court trials. And we were rightfully, when we were thinking that's going to have an effect on the election if he's found guilty of this and that. But we didn't see maybe as Elon Musk buying Twitter and then, arguably buying the election. Where do you want to pick up?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think that what Trump has to grapple with right now is, what does Elon Musk mean for his administration and what does it mean for him politically? You could easily see a scenario right now where Democrats, as they map out their campaign plans for the midterms, are saying to themselves, look, we can actually run against Elon Musk more easily than we could run against Donald Trump. Donald Trump's numbers right now are actually not terrible. They're not. If you look at his polling numbers, they're not terrible. That doesn't mean everyone approves of what he's been doing. The numbers are not terrible. Elon Musk, on the other hand, he does not register well in public opinion surveys. And so you could see Democrats easily taking this outcome in Wisconsin and saying, we're going to focus our advertising, we're going to focus our campaign theme on running against Elon Musk. Now, what does that mean for Trump? It means Trump has to decide, does he want to keep Musk around or does he want to dispatch of him? He faces this real question right now in terms of what he wants to do. And by the way, if you're Trump, you have to handle Elon Musk with care, right? Because you don't want to alienate him too much because he's the wealthiest guy in the world. We've already seen him. He could dump endless amounts of money into politics. This isn't like some cabinet member that Trump might feel he can push around a little bit more easily. Elon Musk is the wealthiest person in the world. You got to handle him with care.
Right. But his money is the issue, it would seem, for Trump. I don't think that Elon's got something on him psychologically or blackmail. It's the money. And then, of course, the money is respect. That's what Trump seems to care most about. There's the richest guy in the world, not only trying to affect America's elections, but Europe's. Your book is Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. The question is about whether or not Trump cares about the midterm elections, cares about his approval rating, cares about the next presidential election, which he's flirting with. And I got to ask you if that's just a distraction, a third term, which is unconstitutional. You're not allowed. But what is his motivation, if not revenge? Because it seems like every day is just a show. The imagery is the most important thing. The performance is the most important thing. He rose to power on The Apprentice, which I was on. I watched that show. I was on that show, and I didn't want to meet him then, don't want to meet him now, but certainly do have an appreciation for what you write about in his book. It's all about the performance, isn't it? Not about the next election, per se?
Yeah, so two things. I think Trump is much more focused on his policy agenda and getting what he wants done. That is his number one thing. And what we've seen is he feels very emboldened to do what he wants to do, whether that's tariffs, whether it's immigration. He's pushing forward despite whatever pushback he gets. He feels very emboldened to do what he wants to do. And you look at tariffs, he feels like he didn't go as far as he wanted to go on tariffs in his first term. He had people around him who pushed back on tariffs. And this time around, he feels like he won the election. He feels like he won all the swing states that he wanted to and that he needed to win. And that gives him the capital to push forward on what he wants to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of revenge was the theme of the campaign, and it's also emerged as the game plan for his presidency. And I have one scene in the book where Trump is watching then President Joe Biden's inauguration in 2024, early 2024. And Biden has this line where he says that basically he says Trump, if he becomes president again, is going to be focused on revenge and retribution, right? And Trump is sitting there with his team and he becomes sarcastic. He says, if I'm president, there will be no revenge. There will be no retribution. Wink. In other words, Trump always knew that revenge was going to be a major part of his White House. He made it a theme of his campaign, going after people like Liz Cheney, which became a major priority after January 6th and after he left the White House. And he's made it a major priority now when he's become president in terms of purging the FBI and the DOJ of anyone who had any connection to anything related to the January 6th investigation.
And purging apparently any lawyer that had anything, and their law firm that they worked for, that had anything to do with any of the investigations into him. I feel like no more in the last couple of weeks has it been obvious that revenge is the motivation than how he's gone after these law firms, not to mention the networks and others as well.
He has made payback a central theme of this White House. And one of the dynamics here to look for is, in some ways, there's a political benefit to Trump in this regard, right? If you're a Republican in Congress, you're more scared than ever to cross Trump. If you are a donor, you're more scared than ever to cross Trump. If you're a lobbyist, you're more scared than ever to cross Trump. And what does this mean for J.D. Vance, right? J.D. Vance is out there, clearly wants to run for president in 2028, but he doesn't want to cross Trump by talking about running for president, because Trump is out there, and you mentioned this, talking about running for president himself in 2028, which he's not allowed to do, whether it's a trolling exercise or not. He's now put J.D. Vance in this position of J.D. Vance doesn't want to start talking about 2028 because he doesn't want to look like he's crossing Trump. So there is tremendous political benefit for Trump in approaching and embracing this theme of payback. He feels like it's worked for him.
Tell me about your approach in writing this book.
So I started writing this book in February of 2023. So Trump had announced his campaign a couple months earlier, and I'd always thought about writing a book at some point in my career. Never really done it. I'd never done it before. But I figured this is going to be an interesting race. It's going to be dramatic. Whatever happens, whether Trump wins or whether he flames out, it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be historic. And so what I did was I went to people who are close to Trump, who work on his campaign, who are outside his campaign, his friends, his donors, his allies in Congress, and other people. And I went to them and I said, look, I want to talk to you regularly, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, whether it's monthly, whatever time you can make for me. And I just want to, you can use me as a journal to dump whatever happened in that day, whatever you saw firsthand, whatever you know about, and just tell me what happened and help me build a narrative of what happened in this campaign. So I spent 2 years reporting this, gathering all that reporting, tying everything together. And basically my goal was to make, as I said earlier, to make readers feel like they're there. Some people did not want to participate. Some people did not want to participate in this, but a lot of people did. And those people understood that I was trying to write a book that was fair, that wasn't anti-Trump, that wasn't pro-Trump, and that also just saw this as an historic race and wanted to help record history.
Yeah, why would they trust you? You're from media, you were at Politico, you're at Axios. I don't know how the record on Trump and his supporters feel about those two outlets, much less anything else that you've ever done. But how do you build credibility? Why would they want to talk to you? That's an interesting thing to me, because that isn't easy.
No, it's a fair question. And I think what I've tried to do in my career is develop relationships over a long period of time. I've been doing this a while. I've been covering Trump for a while. I've been covering the Republican Party for a really long time, actually. And so I've tried to develop relationships over a number of years. I hope people trust me. I hope that they see me as a fair arbiter. And I think people more or less trusted me. And I would like to think they did anyways, that I wouldn't divulge what they were telling me, that I wouldn't present it in an unfair light. And as I said, a lot of people did participate. A few people didn't want to participate. There is distrust in Trump world towards the media. There just is. That's always going to be there. But some people did want to play ball.
Your book, it's easy to think that Trump says almost the same thing publicly as he does privately. I think you know how he feels about a person in general, but he doesn't actually say the same thing publicly that he does privately, at least not always. You have a lot of examples of this in your book. Many of them, I don't know who he really hates or loves to mess with the most, but given your book and given his history, Ron DeSantis has got to be up there as one of his top targets, people that he really does not like. Why? I mean, about him or anybody else, because there's a lot in the book. The quotes that he says publicly versus privately about DeSantis and many others, including his son-in-law.
Yeah. So focusing first on Ron DeSantis, because this is actually important. It goes into an important theme of the book. Yeah. But Trump sees himself as a big city political boss. And so during his first term in the White House, he would talk privately about an old Brooklyn big city political boss by the name of Meade Esposito, who decades ago ruled Brooklyn with an iron fist, traded favors, and expected things in return, basically. And Trump sees himself in a similar light. And Trump endorsed Ron DeSantis in his 2018 governor's run, feels, and perhaps correctly so, that DeSantis owes him for his victory. Yeah. And couldn't believe that DeSantis would run against him. He just couldn't believe it. He couldn't wrap his brain around it. And for a long time, he actually didn't believe that DeSantis would run against him. He did not believe it, even though people around Trump were saying, oh, believe me, he's running. And so when Trump found out about it, I have this scene in my book, he turns to J.D. Vance, and this was in very early 2023. Vance had just been elected to the Senate, and Trump had, of course, endorsed Vance. And Trump tells Vance, I'm going to squash that guy like a bug. And Trump's goal was not just to squash DeSantis like a bug, even though it was. He wanted to destroy DeSantis politically and make it impossible for him to run for anything ever again.
And there are so many other examples of him wanting to destroy people and making them impossible for them to be able to do anything again. Give me another one, though. There were so many of these legal cases, so we could talk about E. Jean Carroll or just about anybody else about how he talks again privately versus publicly. Give me another example, Alex.
Sure. So one of the things that he said about the E. Jean Carroll and Stormy Daniels cases, he completely denied privately that he had affairs with either one of these women. And he used very colorful language, a couple F-bombs. I don't know that I'm allowed to swear on your show. I don't know what the rules are.
There's no rules.
Well, do you want to read that quote? I don't know if you have it.
E. Jean Carroll says, I fucked her. Stormy Daniels says, I fucked her, but I never fucked them. Everybody's fucking everybody, but I never fucked any of these people. I'm sorry for laughing, but that is because it's a hard.
I can confirm that's a quote in the book, and I'm glad you said it, not me. Yeah, I can confirm that is a quote in the book that he says. Yeah, but he drops a lot of F-bombs in private, and that's how we talked about that case.
It's crazy. It's a little bit crazier, or a little bit more acerbic, or just gross in this case than he talks publicly. I'd say a lot, maybe a lot more. But you know how he feels. He denies things and he calls names, but it's just that much worse behind the scenes. Talk to me about this woman who's now his chief of staff, Susie Wiles. You talked to her, didn't you?
So Susie Wiles is a really important figure in Trump world right now. Probably the most important. Probably more important than Elon Musk, to be honest with you. Trump's 2016 campaign was pure chaos. His White House was pure chaos. His 2020 campaign, of course, was pure chaos. And so Trump goes back after he's from the White House. He's licking his wounds. He is a pariah now for his role in the January 6th Capitol assault. He has nothing. He has no political operation to speak of. His future is up in the air. And so he brings aboard Susie Wiles. And Susie Wiles rebuilds his political operation. This is someone who, in Susie Wiles, she has no tolerance for chaos. She has no tolerance for backstabbing. She has no tolerance for people leaking on one another, all of which were hallmarks of Trump's administration and his campaign, his previous campaigns. And she essentially just rebuilds Trump's political operation and brought in a level of competence and expertise that he just did not have before. And Trump really appreciates that. And so he made her, after she ran his campaign, 2024 campaign, co-managed it, she made her his chief of staff. And so you see a White House now. Of course, there's been a level of chaos. It's Trump world after all. There is chaos and drama and intrigue that comes with it. But compared to the previous Trump White House, it's actually been a lot more chaos-free, a lot more drama-free than in comparison to that. And that's in no small part because of Susie Wiles, and she set up a structure that doesn't necessarily tolerate as much of that kind of stuff.
And yet, and he's got more resistance. He's got less resistance from cabinet secretaries and so on. He's got Elon Musk wreaking havoc, but he's also doing this tariff thing and the Canada thing, especially, and the Greenland thing. And Alex, I don't think he said anything about Canada or Greenland in the entire campaign. You didn't write anything about that, I don't think, in your book. This seems new. Of course, the tariffs have been something he's always done. But my point is he's got nobody telling him or stopping him from doing these outrageous things. And specifically in terms of the tariff thing, there's no policy here. This is not conservative economic policy, obviously. Certainly no captains of industry want to see this. I suppose there will be some winners and losers in certain industries, but most voters, consumers, Americans, the economy are going to lose according to everyone. And this time around, there's nobody seemingly stopping him. That's my point. Do I have that wrong?
I think you have it exactly right. And you have a White House that is very different than the first White House. In the first White House, remember what you had, right? You had different power centers, people who disagreed with one another, right? So you had the more and I'm using this word in quotation marks, globalist wing of the White House, more free trade oriented people like Gary Cohn of Goldman Sachs, people like Jared Kushner, Dina Powell. These people hail from the sort of Goldman Sachs wing of the Republican Party. They're traditionalists in terms of other economics. But then you had the quote unquote America First wing, which was led by Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
Then you had the establishment wing of the White House, which was led by Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. And then you had this other figure in Republican politics, Kellyanne Conway. And so you had these factions. They warred with one another. They pushed back on one another. And so when Trump wanted to do something, he'd get pushback from some people. He'd get advocacy for those positions from some people. But you saw this constant clash, and it played out publicly oftentimes. This White House is very different. You have a White House that is much more in sync with one another, that is much more focused on facilitating what Trump wants to do, allowing him to push forward on what he wants to do. You don't have the same dissent. And so it's a very different dynamic than the first White House. Very different. You could see Trump getting pushback internally for some of the things that he would want to do right now if you were taking place in the first White House. You might have some pushback internally this time around, but it's not nearly to the same extent as the first White House.
This is just my opinion. You may or may, it's obviously a lot of nuance, but I think that he has appointed arguably more incompetent people this time in terms of they're not right or ready for the role that they're in. I could argue the same thing about Trump 1, but a lot of the people that he appointed to the cabinet secretaries were, I would argue, more serious, more, quote, successful people in their own right in different ways. We could go one-to-one Rex Tillman versus Marco Rubio or something. Clearly, Rubio is qualified for the job. But when I look at this guy like Waltz, this dude does not look like he's ready for prime time at all. The guy for national security who the CIA reports to, much less the head of the CIA, much less Tulsi Gabbard, certainly Kash Patel. All I'm saying is these guys are not, they have no experience in government and running giant institutions, bureaucracies, and you're likely to see mistakes because it looks like they didn't go through orientation on how to use the phone and not add a journalist to a national security chat. So my point is it seems like a lot of them are more incompetent, thus probably more likely to make career-altering, country-altering, consequential mistakes. What do you think?
Trump had a very different approach in building his cabinet this time around from Trump 1.0.
Yeah.
And so this time around, his priority was picking loyalists, people who he knew, like Pete Hegseth, who had his back. Hegseth was on Fox News, was a pro-Trump guy for a long time on TV. Trump really cares about that, right? He really cares about that. Trump, the first time around, regrets that he brought in people like Jim Mattis, like Rex Tillerson, people who were recommended to him for their expertise. That was, this time around, it was less about expertise from a policy perspective than about proving your loyalty to him. And so it's just a different administration. It's not the first, this is a very different administration than the first Trump administration. It's just, you can't compare the two of them.
And I feel like,
it's like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Apples and oranges.
I'm sorry, I stepped in you there. But J.D. Vance as the vice president and Elon Musk as the co-president would seem to be the two of the biggest differences.
Yeah, look, J.D. Vance, one of the big reasons he got picked, and I go into a lot of this in the book, but Vance emerged as a loyal figure. Now, interesting, though, because Vance, as some of your listeners will remember, years ago—
called him a Nazi!
He literally called Trump American Hitler or something.
It's my favorite narrative, my favorite point, because Alex, as I've said so many times, and nowhere in all of life did you call somebody a Nazi one day and then the next day work for them. Okay, maybe somewhere, but
it's one of the worst things you could say about someone, calling them Hitler. It's like one of the worst things you could say about someone, right? And J.D. Vance had this transformation from a fiercely anti-Trump figure to a fiercely pro-Trump figure. And one of the things I track in the book is how that transformation, how J.D. Vance proved his loyalty to Trump, how he waged this behind-the-scenes, years-long campaign, years in plural, to prove Trump that he would be a loyal figure. And so that's what J.D. Vance is now. Trump is convinced that J.D. Vance will be more loyal to him than Mike Pence was.
Give me an anecdote or more about how he did it.
So shortly, this was during the start of the 2022 campaign when J.D. Vance was preparing to run for Senate. He went to Trump, met with him with his mentor, a guy by the name of Peter Thiel, who a lot of your listeners know, co-founded PayPal, big billionaire, had a cameo in The Social Network, and basically those two went to Trump. And Vance, during that meeting, his goal wasn't necessarily to win Trump's endorsement on the spot during that meeting, but to just keep it so that Trump wouldn't attack him, right? And so over time, J.D. Vance, they kept back channeling to Trump, and Trump went on and endorsed Vance in that race, propelled Vance to victory. He became a senator. And then over the next 2 years, Vance kept talking with Trump. They maintained this relationship. Vance is about half Trump's age. People forget that. But the two became really close. And there's a moment in the book where early on in 2024, J.D. Vance goes to meet with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And Trump says, J.D., you're so hot right now. You're really hot right now. And it became very clear to Vance from that point forward that Trump was thinking about naming him vice president, that he had him on the short list. And so J.D. Vance's people waged a very savvy campaign. Vance had the support of really important figures like Don Jr., Tucker Carlson, and they waged a very effective campaign. And they also did a great job of effectively knifing Doug Burgum in the back. And Burgum, of course, was Vance's main opposition for the VP slot, and now he's in the cabinet himself.
We could talk about that, but you have to read the book. J.D. Vance leads to Elon Musk, the tech bros and the tech billionaires and the ideology, the insanely crazy ideology that I feel like a lot of Washington journalists don't understand or aren't covering, that seemingly is really dominating what's going on right now, because this is all this Elon Musk Doge stuff comes from all those tech billionaire and what's his name, Curtis Yarvin, and all those influential thinkers who are not that smart in my opinion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The J.D. Vance definitely is part of this wing of the tech bro wing. You could absolutely, and one of the things I talk about in this book is that Elon Musk actually played a role in getting J.D. Vance picked for the slot. So Elon Musk endorses Trump the night of the July 13th assassination attempt. Shortly thereafter, and keep in mind, from the assassination attempt to Vance's pick, there were 36 hours, right? Crazy time in American politics. And so Musk has a conversation with Trump by phone, and Musk says, look, you got to pick J.D. Vance. And if you don't pick J.D. Vance and you pick an establishment figure, it's going to give the establishment deep state more incentive to try to kill you again. And so J.D. Vance was one of those figures Elon Musk was one of those figures who was in Trump's ear to try to get him to pick J.D. Vance. And ultimately, the Musk wing won out on that because you had other people in that world pushing for Vance as well, like David Sachs, who's also now playing a role in the Trump administration.
Right. You have this great, or I don't know if that's the word, but this section in the book about the assassination attempt on Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania by that young man. And the picture that came out of it, obviously, and even the hospital room. I hadn't seen that anywhere else. And it's pretty provocative and really interesting and important. Give us a little teaser on it.
Yeah. So one of the things I did in reporting out this book is, we all know what happened on stage at Butler, right? We've all seen the very disturbing video footage of that. But there hasn't been a lot of reporting on what happened in the hospital. And so what I tried to do is one of my goals in writing this chapter was take readers behind the scenes in terms of what happened in the hospital, because we don't know that much about it, right? And so there are a couple interesting anecdotes from that. One is that capturing the level of chaos in Trump world and the uncertainty about whether Trump was going to live or die was very real. People didn't know his condition at that point. And it was pure mayhem. You had a reporter at one point reach out to one of Trump's spokespeople and said, we're about to report that Trump has died in the hospital. And the campaign had to push back on that. There was a moment where he was so bloody in the hospital that his shirt was off and he was on a stretcher. There's a moment where Trump was thinking about politics, right? He never stopped thinking about politics even when he was in the hospital. And so there's a moment when he gets a CAT scan and he asks the nurse for a copy of the CAT scan because he says he wants to use it and release it publicly to compare his mental condition to that of Joe Biden's. And you talk about these pictures that were shown, of course, of him raising the fist.
Yeah.
And he took a look at those pictures and he said, that is the most American iconic photo I've ever seen. And it goes to show something that is a theme of this book, which is Trump's understanding of visuals and the choreography of politics. That's something that escapes a lot of politicians, but it's something that he understands.
And even if it doesn't escape them, they have a hard time creating that imagery. Although I would argue Senator Booker did a pretty good job of it over the last 24 hours. That was a performance that got the attention of all of political media and beyond, arguably. Got seen on TikTok over 400 million times or something. I thought that was a good example of somebody else being able to perform and create imagery that mattered in this case in a way that Trump every day tries to win that news cycle with that type of imagery. And obviously he did there.
Yeah, it's about cutting through. I agree with you. Cory Booker definitely cut through the noise. With that, it's hard to cut through the noise.
Yeah, it's hard
these days. There's just so much of it.
Alex,
yeah, Booker definitely did. Yeah.
Alex, I'm no conspiracy theorist. I'm the anti-conspiracy theorist guy. I don't believe in anything. But we never did get any. Where did the blood come from? We saw a bandage on his ear. How come there was never any report of the injury? I feel, and I'm sure I missed it, or maybe I didn't, that we don't know what caused the blood. Was it a bullet? Was it fragments of the teleprompter? Was it just the vibrations of the bullet that got that close? Because we don't see a chunk. When you look at him today, if somebody got shot in the ear, you would see some kind of scarring. There's no close-up pictures. There's no doctor's reports. Why?
Not only is there not a lot of reporting on that, but there's also not a lot of reporting on the shooter. We don't know very much about that young man who shot him. We don't know much about it. And Trump himself actually has privately raised questions about that. And it says, what's going on here? The fact that we don't know what this person's motivations are, who his friends are, what connections he had, that his iPhone has been his phone has been such a dark hole for investigators. That's also a major outstanding question here. We spend a lot of time focusing on the Secret Service and their lapses here, but you're right. There's a lot of unanswered questions, I think.
You answer a lot of questions in the book. I highly recommend that people go buy it right now. Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. I hope I impressed you enough with my interviewing skills that you'll come back and talk to me more often.
Oh, anytime. Anytime.
Thanks a lot, Alex. I really appreciate it, and congratulations.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Well, there you go. Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. Alex Isenstadt of Axios. please go on over and let him know that you heard him here on the show, because we can get him back on other stories that he's writing. Axios Alex is his handle, and you can go follow him on the social media, all the social media outlets. I've linked to it in the show notes. And go get the book right now if you're interested in that interview subject matter, and it's pretty damn relevant. Very few people know Trump the way that reporter certainly does. Great to finally connect with Alex. Followed his work for a while, so I was happy that he reached out to me, and real happy to do the interview. All right, well, there it is. That's all I've got for you on today's episode of Stand Up. Can't do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Go on over there and sign up if you haven't already. And if you can give more, I would really appreciate it. It would mean a lot. Nobody is getting rich over here. We're humming along and very happy to be doing it, but can't do it without your support. So thank you for keeping it up. And go buy John Carroll's album. There's so many different ways to support stand-up members. John Carroll is a very talented singer and songwriter. He's got a new album out. Of course, I've been plugging it every day, and I got to keep playing those tracks, John. Get me back on track here at the end of the show. Be the change you want to see in the world, everybody, and I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Tell your friends.
Start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up.